That's where we'll begin with a news story today. And we begin with Major League Baseball, but not the league. This time it's the players. The MLBPA, the Players Association, is suing DraftKings and FanDuel on Monday, accusing the sports betting companies and two others of using the names and likenesses of hundreds of players on their platform without asking for permission. So the Players Union seeking compensatory and punitive damages from these companies: DraftKings, Britain's Bet365 group in Philadelphia court, and from FanDuel and Underdog Fantasy in a New York state court in Manhattan. So essentially, what does it mean? Sports books and fantasy companies using name and likeness of players without getting their permission. And so here is the statement from the Players Association. For professional athletes, the ability to control the commercial use of their names, images, and likenesses is a crucial return on their substantial career investment. And whether or not you agree or disagree with the statement is sort of irrelevant. If they don't have permission to use the players, then they're going to have to either gain permission or pay some punitive damages here. I think MLBPA may have a case, indeed, in this matter. The Carolina Panthers made their case to change quarterbacks. It was a really easy one. Bryce Young has had a really tough time since being drafted by the Carolina Panthers. Lowest rated quarterback in the National Football League. They keep losing games over and over again. I believe he's 2-16 in his last 18 games he has appeared. And so the Panthers have made their decision to go to none other than one of those ageless backup wonders in the National Football League. Yes, Andy Dalton is back at starting quarterback in the National Football League. It feels like he's been in the league 20 years. If I had to look it up, I would guess that's probably close to accurate. And he'll take over and's got a tough test. They got to go play the Raiders this week on the road. Raiders played very well against the Baltimore Ravens. Head coach of the Panthers, Dave Canales, talks about the move to the Red Rifle.
Bryce is our quarterback. I'd love to see this thing just continue to take the next steps offensively right now.
Will he start next week?
Bryce is our quarterback. We're going to just continue to shore up and fix the things we need to fundamentally from a scheme standpoint. All those things. These are all valuable reps. These are all valuable games. We'll learn a lot from this game, and hopefully we'll take another step this week. You know, after yesterday, just went home, watched the film, had some conversations with coaches, with Dan Brandt. So had to gather a lot of information through this morning and made that decision after looking at it that this is the best decision for our group, for our team going forward. Yeah, there's a lot of factors. We want to play more football. A lot of factors that go into it, for this decision, and ultimately just kind of lands on my shoulders to be able to make the best decision for our group to give us our best chance to win this week. And we focus on the weeks. We focus on the challenge at hand, and we feel like Andy gives us our best chance to meet the challenge.
I think that going from 12 hours, 24 hours later, I feel like we needed that SpongeBob meme in there also as well. And by the way, let's read between the lines here. Make no mistake about it. Dave Canales probably not making that decision. General manager, owner, someone else stepping in, telling him to make the decision. Andy Dalton's back. Pick him up in fantasy, if you dare. Atlanta Falcons, another team against the spread as an underdog, winning the game outright. That's exactly what the NFL has been through 2 weeks of the season, folks. Make no mistake about it. If the last 2 weeks you bet all the underdogs, you could go out to a nice dinner tonight. 22-21, Falcons beat the Eagles. Couple of things went wrong for the Eagles. Dropped the ball late. Also didn't try and kick a field goal at one point when they had an easy one. Didn't get a fourth down. Sort of some bizarre play calling, to say the least, as certainly the Eagles right now are one of those teams that definitely need to pick up some pieces, and the Atlanta Falcons are flying high.
We wanted to. They were running a certain defense and junking it up in the middle. So we're trying to go around the outside, and it didn't work.
What was your thought pattern there on going kicking the field goal 43? Did you think about going for it?
Again, in that scenario, I was thinking they might not have any timeouts there, but obviously they did with the incomplete pass. That would have came down to maybe a minute, and so we wanted to go up 6 points, and it didn't work. So, the decision to to pass it there. Again, like I said, where they were junking it up inside, with it being 4th and 3 to go for it, I thought, with them not having any timeouts, I wanted them to be down a touchdown and see if they could drive the field, and they did. Hats off to them.
Yeah, bottom line, another loss for the Philadelphia Eagles, and another disappointing loss if you date back to last year. I guess they're fortunate, you could say, to be 1-1, honestly, in the season. All right, let's go and hit on Cooper Kupp and the injuries to the National Football League. There are a ton. First two guys are my first two receivers in fantasy football. I know nobody wants to hear me talk about my fantasy team, but I'm a Cooper Kupp guy. I'm a Deebo Samuel guy. What am I going to do this week? I have no idea. Cooper Kupp going to be probably placed on injury reserve, would be a guess from me. I don't know that as a fact. We'll find out tomorrow. And then yesterday, out of nowhere, late in the day, Kyle Shanahan comes out, says Deebo Samuel's got a calf strain. Oh, by the way, he's going to miss 2 weeks. So he is out for the 49ers. And so is Christian McCaffrey. And the 49ers are already in trouble this early on in the season. But you know what? They're not the only ones. Adam Kaufman's going to join us. Ton of injuries at this point of the season. Also, Jawan Bentley, who has totaled more than 100 tackles each of the past 3 seasons, tore his left pectoral muscle. He's on the Patriots. He's expected to miss a lot of time. Usually this is season ending. Also, Graham Gano, the Giants went into the game with a hurt kicker, and guess what? He got hurt in the game. Shocker. Graham Gano going to miss a few weeks. Maybe the Giants will have a kicker this week and can kick field goals. They're 0-2. All right, quarterback changes across the board, especially with Michigan and Wisconsin. So let's get to those. Sharon Moore makes a big announcement yesterday. Alex Orji is going to be at the helm at starting quarterback for the Wolverines. They're just trying to score points. They've had all kinds of issues. Of course, their former quarterback is in the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings and not playing. And also Tyler Van Dyke, the transfer from Miami to Wisconsin, has a torn ACL, and he's going to miss the rest of the season. They play against USC, and Wisconsin also had a hard time scoring points early on in the year. NC State is turning to C.J. Bailey as starting quarterback. Grayson McCall was knocked out last week with an undisclosed injury against Louisiana Tech. And sources say that Air Force has emerged as a serious target, potentially to move to the AAC. Again, a lot of conference movement going on. The AAC has 14 football schools this season, including a couple of the academies, Army and Navy. So Air Force would make some sense there. Okay, we're down to less than 2 weeks in the regular season for Major League Baseball. National League wild card is going to come right down probably to that series next week between the Braves and Mets. The Mets right now hold a 1-game lead for the wild card, and they walk off the Nats and win 2-1, and the Braves got shut out again. I don't remember the last time the Braves have been shut out so many times in the season. 9-0 last night against the Dodgers. Tigers win again. They beat the Royals. They're now a game and a half back of the final wild card spot in the American League. The Detroit Tigers, yeah, remember them from years and years ago? They're back in the playoff mix. Hey, Luis Ariz of the Padres had a great few months here. Finally struck out for the first time, ending a streak of 141 consecutive plate appearances without striking out. And speaking of striking out, Mike Trout hasn't struck out, hasn't done anything, missed most of the season. He says, he told the LA Times that he is open to moving from center field to right field coming up next season. One big game in the WNBA tonight amongst the schedule, and I'm sure we will be watching. It is the Lynx taking on the Sun on the road. The Sky will visit the Dream. The Aces will take on the Storm. Those are the 3 games. The Aces, of course, are very good. They're big road favorites. We'll keep an eye on a couple of those games as well. Welcome back to Newswire here on SportsGrid. We've got Sam McQuillan with us from Legal Sports Report. And Sam, it has been a slow year across the United States for news on legalizing sports betting. And I guess partially the reason why is because it was such an incredible first few years when they repealed PASPA and all of these different states started legalized sports gambling. So last year, the big story was Florida, obviously getting it, and the Hard Rock, back and forth, everything else. But it does appear that our story to cover in the final quarter of the year is Missouri, with it going on the ballot in November. But it's now being met with people who do not want this legalized. So I guess the question becomes is not, is it going to get legalized or not, Sam, but what does this opposition really look like?
Yeah, definitely, Craig. You're spot on with, the more states that have legalized, the less you have left to legalize, unless we would add more states to the 50 we already have. But it's been a slow year for companies. They're kind of focusing on Missouri, as you mentioned, which will bring sports betting to the ballot in November. Now, ahead of November, we have some opposition that's popped up. We hadn't really had much either side for or against this ballot. But as we get closer to November, I imagine we'll get more and more of this kind of groups coming out opposing it or being for it. So the group that came out against it, surprisingly, is actually Caesars. They donated $4 million to a newly formed political action committee called Missourians Against the Deceptive Online Gambling Amendment, which was obviously formed to have commercials or pass out pamphlets, whatever it may be, any sort of information that would have people vote against this ballot. Now, you might ask, why Caesars? Don't they want sports betting in Missouri? And the answer to that question is yes, they do want sports betting in Missouri, but they want it on their terms. As the language is written in this amendment, it would allow each of the state's casinos to have one sports betting license and also create two more, which would be called untethered, basically no requirements that you have a partnership with a land-based casino or a racetrack, which we've seen a lot of other states do. So this is a departure from previous attempts to legalize in Missouri, which would have given each casino multiple licenses. There's about 6 in Missouri, so that would have created up to 12, 15 sports books, each of which would be controlled by the casinos and no untethered ones. So the PAC says this question was written by and for the financial benefit of out-of-state corporations and sponsors and funders, which would probably be FanDuel and DraftKings, who are the 2 sports books that have donated to the campaign to legalize. They've donated $11.5 million to get this on the ballot, to get it passed by the people, to create an amendment. So Caesars is the first, it's pretty notable, Caesars is the first company that owns a casino or owns sports betting to oppose it. Others like BetMGM, MGM doesn't have any casinos in the state. They haven't gotten involved yet. So pretty notable that Caesars is coming out here and sort of directly opposing FanDuel and DraftKings. Now, if you ask me whether or not this will pass, I'd have to lean on yes, because there's more money coming in on one direction. I know Missouri has wanted to legalize sports betting for a while. If sort of the only argument that's being put out there is by a casino that just wants more control over it, it'd be sort of a tough hill to climb. But you never know. Missouri's been a tough one for a while. So we'll check back in a few weeks, I'm sure, when more money comes the other way, and have to see in November.
Yeah, no, look, this is going to be the big story for us at the end of the year to see if this ends up happening. All right, so we know that FanDuel and DraftKings, especially DraftKings in particular, we know are upset with the tax rate in some of these different states, including New York, above 50%, some other places 30%, 40%. But Sam, the interesting story, and I know that you guys wrote about this at Legal Sports Report, is it appears as though they're going to try and make that money up in some way. They tried once by, DraftKings tried once by essentially saying that they were going to do something that they got walked back on. But do they really think, Sam, that they're going to get away with like raising their minus 110s to minus 130s with nobody noticing and things like, because there are other options for people to take to. And I also wonder if the competitors are to DraftKings and FanDuel, if they choose to do this, just kind of stick it to them by saying, hey, look, same bets, you guys are charging minus 130, we're only minus 110. I don't understand how they think they're going to get away with this.
Yeah, so the companies themselves have not outright came out and said anything about adjusting the prices. Now, they do have a lobbying group called the Sports Betting Alliance, which represents all of the companies and has essentially threatened, hey, states, if you raise your tax rates, like they did in Illinois when they were fighting the tax raise there, it's going to make prices worse for the customer. So essentially saying the companies are going to do this, the companies themselves have not actually come out and said anything. Another group that has been very vocal on this issue is Wall Street. They have a lot of stake in the game. They don't want these companies to be losing $200 million a year from just one state raising its taxes. So the firms have done a lot of research. One called Truist came out this week and said that if FanDuel and DraftKings raise their prices across the board, that's pretty interesting, not just in a single state, but across the nation, they could add about $240 million in revenue, which sort of fits perfectly in that hole of revenue that they're projecting just from the Illinois tax increase next year. Pretty interesting that it's not a state-by-state measure. They've kind of threatened that in the past, or at least talked about it. But it seems like it would be difficult just in the market, the way you market your odds, to say, hey, in New York, it's minus 140, but in a state like New Jersey, it's plus 110. It seems like that would be pretty difficult to do. They have never really gotten into why they might do it or why they might not do it. Now, overseas in Germany, sort of similar thing has happened in the past where the country made a tax on handle, and operators dealt with it by passing the cost down to the customers there. The operator that now leads there actually got around it by just driving people towards more profitable bets. More profitable bets lately have been parlays and same-game parlays, which these companies have repeatedly driven people to. So if I had to guess what they would do, I would just guess that they'll try to drive more people towards those more profitable bets and hold off on raising prices for now. But it is something that sort of is in the back that's being threatened and being thought about and pushed by at least some investors in Wall Street.
Okay. Well, look, I again, to know that people won't notice this is silly. So it just depends. Like a minus 112 instead of a minus 110, Sam, maybe they could get away with that. Minus 113, 15, but raising it significantly, there are a lot of different options. And it's interesting that coalition is involved, because it sounds like to me it would have to be everyone agreeing to do it as opposed to just one or two of the sports betting companies. All right. Finally, NFL. Try to make heads or tails of what's going on this year, Sam, amongst all years. The only thing that I can tell you, and I've said this earlier in the show, I'm going to say it again, is that laying points in the NFL above like 1 or 2 is a losing proposition. These teams are very similar, if not the same. The look-ahead lines, not look-ahead, for this week, Sam, there's only one team that's a 7-point favorite in the NFL this week. Only one. That's it. Everybody else under. I think that's the big adjustment we're going to have to see from the books.
Yeah, you see the big reaction there. People probably hesitant to bet on teams getting more than 7 points. Obviously, the Ravens had a huge upset this past week. The Cowboys got destroyed by the Saints. Underdogs went 10-5-1 against the spread and 8-8 straight up after last night, after Philly faltered to Atlanta. So it's pretty interesting to see the sportsbooks adjust the spreads down. They had a great week, according to McQuarrie, which estimates that they held about 16% on all bets, which is double what you would usually expect in a week that bounces back from a really bad week one. The public was on the favorite in 14 of the 16 games. So obviously the sports books cleaned up there as well. It's really interesting to see how these odds move throughout the week. Obviously there's about only one game with a huge spread. We'll see how high that goes, and we'll see if people bet it down before next week. But definitely an interesting start to the season in terms of betting and what the books are making.
Yeah, San Francisco right now, 7-point road favorites. That's the biggest one at the Rams. And the Rams, of course, have like a ton of injuries, so that does make sense. But so does San Francisco, too. It's a crazy league. All right, Sam, great to catch up with you. Thanks again for coming on Newswire. Appreciate it.
Yep, thanks a lot, Craig. Talk to you next week.